Hey everyone, thanks for joining today's session. Uh, Today's session we have Vidya. She's based out of Vancouver, and she has been a AI practitioner for quite some time. I've known Vidya for probably close to 15 years. She used to work at Ericsson. And Vidya has been an earlier adopter of generic AI, and she has helped many of the startups embrace the AI journey. And she continues to do that. She's also an active speaker and community enabler at various AI community across Canada. With that brief introduction, I would like to invite Vidya. Vidya, welcome and thanks for accepting to talk to the community. Looking forward to interesting discussion.
Thank you, Prem, and thanks for having me here. And it's a pleasure to be around here, you folks. And I will give a I'll start with a small intro, and I'll start my slideshow first, and then I'll kick off from there.
Sure.
Share my screen. Oh, I might probably need a bit faster for sharing.
Yes, now you should be able to share.
Got it. Thank you. All right, so get started. So yeah, my name is Vidya. I am currently the engineering manager for quality engineering at Okta. The part of the organization I work for in Okta is there's a subunit called Auth0. Auth0 was a startup that got acquired by Okta, and my primary responsibilities have been around the domain of quality. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about is going to be about a mix of experiments that we've been doing at Okta, and a lot of my personal experiments and a lot of my personal learnings that we have gotten along the way in this experience of agentic workflows and all of that. I've specifically mentioned the title of the talk to be how I built multiple agentic workflows, and I got rid of a lot of them because that's how my experiment progressed. And a lot of what I will talk about today is how each of this experiment evolved and what are my learnings from this and how I use those learnings in the subsequent experiments and different portfolios and all of that. One thing I want to also call out is please feel free to stop me anytime, any of the slides. It's not like I have to walk through all of the slides or anything. Each of this will be an item of its own. So feel free to stop me anywhere if you have questions. And with that, we can go forward. So as I said, I'm in the domain of quality, and I was always in the domain of quality. And the passion for my domain has always been about developer productivity and quality and the intersection of all of those worlds. So when the boom of AI started, long before the whole Claude Code world and all that, when LangChain was a thing, and when the world was all about ChatGPT and GPT stuff, one of the things that we initially set out to solve, and we're still trying to solve in a way, is because of the nature of quality teams, first thing we wanted to solve was, okay, what can we do about AI-based test plan creation or test code creation? Because we thought that was one of the most trivial problems that we could solve. And we were wrong in multiple ways. So that's what we're going to talk about. So what was the core objective? We wanted to build an assistant that kind of worked with Slack, with GitHub Action, wherever we wanted to work, with an automatic assistant for a developer that can generate a very comprehensive test plan based on the context given to it. And taking it a little step further, we also wanted it to generate the test automation code. Test automation we thought was going to be pretty straightforward, mostly because most test automation frameworks these days are almost like I click a button, I see a thing, and I don't see a thing. So that's mostly how UI validation happens. And even for API validation, it should be fairly straightforward. So that was something we set out to solve. And we immediately kind of realized to generate the test plan, all of what we need was for the whichever model that we use has to understand the current code base that we have, and it also needs to understand everything about the product that is under testing. So, and we also had one fundamental premises on all of this is that we will develop a tool that will always work with existing code base, and that will not be something like, let's create something from the scratch and let's use this brand new tool and create every new automation through that. That was not the world that we were trying to solve. We were trying to integrate AI into our existing system and existing code bases. That was the problem space that we were trying to solve. So this first trial was long before Cloud Code was something that was existing. And so we started initially with LangChain. So the first thing we set out to solve was the context, was the knowledge that we had to give to the models to understand what our product was. This was very specifically important for the test planning cases because one is the feature under test is not going to have any public documentation, even if we are let's consider we have a feature that's already in public, and the model that is being used might not be trained on that feature, so it might not have an understanding of that feature at all. So we wanted to set out to solve this context problem. And at that point in time, the immediate answer was, let's put all the documents together, let's embed them into the vector store, and then do a semantic search. To the point of the semantic search, at this point, you don't necessarily even need an LLM to answer some of the questions about the documents because plain semantic search algorithms work very well with embeddings. So we were like, oh, this is nice. We can give it a lot of documents. It can quickly search for it, and it can answer the questions we have about the document. So that it solves one of the biggest problems, which is for the onboarding, which is new people coming in will have to look through different set of documents. We'll always have to go back and ask questions, but this is solving. They can ask in natural language and it answers it. So that's a little bit of factor that's solved. And we took it a little further. We were using ChatGPT then. So we used that vector store as a source for this LLM. We also did the same embedding logic to our code base. So we had a vector store for the code base. We had a vector store for the documents, put both of this together as the knowledge context for the LLM and wrote a big system prompt and got it to respond. And all of this was with LangChain and LangGraph. This worked, like the proof of concept of it was there. It worked. It kind of worked pretty good as well. But the whole infrastructure setup of it and the whole time it took to get the chunking right, to get the right set of embedding model in place and right set of chunks in place and to get the right query coming through was quite a long process. And it was actually also a slow process. And all of this again was sitting in a Lambda. We were putting everything out to directly talking to OpenAI through APIs and all of that. So it was a long process, slow process, and security was still a little bit of a concern because we were not quite comfortable about the fact that we are sending everything out there to ChatGPT for it to read about. But again, this was the initial experiment. This is what was available then. So we went on with it. So as and when we were looking into the how do we solve the infrastructure problems of it and all that, came AWS Bedrock. So that's when in immediate next variation of this happened. So if you see in this diagram, you will still see the core of this use case still sitting there. We switched to using Claude Code. Claude, not Claude Code here, but the Claude here. We switched to using Claude through Bedrock, one that gave us a lot of security in terms of what is going through is always going through our infrastructure stuff, and it is also a reliable pathway. Bedrock came with its own ways to give guardrails for all of the messages that goes back and forth, and most of all, it came with a pretty decent, not like I'm not going to say it is like a very good way to debug this whole system, but it came up with a pretty decent way to look at the logs of how the thinking is happening and all of that. That was one good win with Bedrock. And if you see here, we are still continuing to rely on the docs. But one thing we took out is there is no vector database for the docs because AWS has something called Kendra. Now, right now, it has also moved along to something called knowledge base. But AWS Kendra as a standalone allows you to put a lot of documents in it. You don't necessarily even have to put the documents in. You can give it a URL for it to crawl and get the documents from the URL directly, and then it serves as a semantic search engine. And it is optimized for LLM use cases, so it was pretty quick to get this transition happening. But we had to still rely on VectorDB for test automation use cases. And there was also a problem of like, oh, we need to keep this test automation VectorDB up to date because it will diverge very quick. It is not an automatic recurring state and anything like that. So this solved parts of our problem. And yes, the user was able to use a Slack, send a question. We took a link from Confluence. We used Confluence API to pull the PRDs from Confluence, processed it, put all of this context together, try to play around with different variations of Claude here. We've tried Haiku, we've tried Sonnet. This was prior to Opus 4.6. So this is we were also keeping track of how much each query costed. And with the test automation vector database and all of it, there was a point in time in this whole experimentation, just within a team of 4 or 5 of us, with the most latest model at that point in time, we ended up spending $600 to $700 per person. That was how much we ended up spending just to get this one use case going. And we quickly realized this again is probably not an ideal way to do things. So we have to start optimizing on this path as well. And most of our problem actually also came from the fact that the vector DB for test automation was not always very reliable. We have to keep constantly going back and rechunking and re-embedding things to get it to a point where we wanted to have it. So by this time, but the flow of this works, so this is great. So we'll still continue looking into optimizing this path. And then happened Claude Code. So when Claude Code came into picture, the whole workflow changed here. The workflow changed because people no longer thought Slack was the right place to start all of this from, but they started feeling very comfortable doing it from the Claude Code terminal. And this made us rethink everything we did there. So whatever we did there was all about what AWS infrastructure gave and what optimizations that we could do on top of that infra. And we even set up a pipeline with the Lambdas and all of that. If you see here, it's like there is a Lambda that takes all of the interaction, tracks all of the inputs, stores this information, and then gets it back, puts the whole test plan into the bucket, and then they have to re-upload the test plan and then get the test automation done. But all of this was in a system that's outside the Git code base for them. So this is still a very bad user experience. So when Claude Code came in, that solved it all for us. So what happened there was it is still the same system prompt. The very first attempt we did with Claude Code was take the same system prompt that we had there. And thankfully, we were using Claude Code also through Bedrock. So we were able to connect to the same knowledge base that we had in the Bedrock, same vector database that we had in the Bedrock, but just what we basically did was instead of getting the whole Slack here, we just completely removed this whole ecosystem and put Claude Code in the front and use the same backend to do all of this stuff. Again, this was all before MCP came into picture. So we were still doing processing through APIs and all of that, but we still use the same knowledge base. We still use the same test automation, vector DB. So this solved the first part, exact same system prompt, exact same stuff. Through Claude Code works. So let's get rid of all of this. This is a lot of overhead to maintain, but it allows for people to start using Claude Code in the terminal and all of that. And that gave us a day-to-day alignment of stuff. So then slowly it happened, the fact skills came into existence. So when skills came into existence, we had a system prompt of about 1,500 lines. So we started chunking it down further. And we said, okay, this system prompt is too big. Sometimes it's very ambiguous. Let's change the prompt to skills. So what are the steps in the test planning? It's like fetching the document, reading through the document that the user gave us, and then matching it all together, form a decision tree there, and then take it from there. Have a very clear template as to what test case is expected out of you, because Claude or any system for that sake has a very notorious habit of creating too many test cases for anything that you give it, be it unit or integration or anything. Unless you give it a very prompt specific guardrail, it's going to go and create tons of test cases. So we've had one of the most basic features, we've had Claude create 600 test cases for like a button click. So that was way too much. So we were like, this is what we want. This is the template we want you to give the output in. And we restricted it to that point. And then that was a skill. So we started making each of this step in the process as a skill and kind of stitched it all together to form a workflow. So the workflow was basically 10 skills put together that went in. When the user gives you the requirements document, go fetch it from the Confluence, go refer to the knowledge bases, and then go look at the existing set of test cases. Now, while we're doing the skills as well, we realized that we don't necessarily even need a vector DB anymore because this is sitting right in your developer space. As long as you're using that skill in that directory for the test cases, you automatically have it. You don't need to build your vector database. So it solved almost everything except for the knowledge base is what we were relying a lot on the infrastructure side of it. So we solved all of that, put it together, pipelined it, and anybody at any point in time can now go and ask hey, this is my PRD, give me the list of test cases, and it'll even go to a point of saying, oh, these are the tests. So look, I already checked with my existing code base and saw that most of this is already covered for you. You just have to tweak a little bit more here and there, and then this will give you your coverage that you need. And do you want me to do it? And yes, you can do it. So that it'll finish that loop. Then came the problem of, okay, this is, how do I know whether this is the right thing to do? This is the right document it's fetching. How do I um, keep that in sync? And I still want to make sure that I automatically reply back when some process is done, because this could be a long running process. So then came MCP, and we started using MCP for internal and external fluxings. So Context 7 is an MCP that pulls any latest public documentation for any of your product bases that is there. So we use that MCP for pulling the public docs for the product. We use Slack MCP to, again, most companies right now use Slack a lot. So Slack is where most conversations happen. What if I want to give a conversation that I have and I want to create a test for that? How do I do it? I give a Slack thread as a context on top of it, and then it uses MCP, gets all the information of the context and mashes it together to give the context for the test plan. Same with Atlassian. I can give it now 10 or 15 other conference pages, 10 or 15 other Jira tickets, put it all together. Using MCP, it'll get all of this information, have the decision tree logic in the skill again, and go ahead and create the test plan and go ahead and fetch the test cases as well. So at this point, this all works. But if all through this conversation, I've not mentioned anything about what model I'm using, or what was the latest? Did I keep going on to the latest model or all of that? This is all because the underlying model was only useful up to a point on the decision. Rest of all the effort was always spent around the context engineering part and making sure that Claude or any system that we use did not hallucinate. So all of our efforts have always been around the skills and always been around what context to give and how to keep this context pretty minimal, so that we do not exhaust the context window, and so that it ends up going back into a form where, oh, I don't even know what you're talking about, and all of that. So when we chunked it down to the skills, we made it look like a pipeline, so that each state hands off the information to the other. And we also had something like a state JSON document, where every state, when it hands off, leaves a little note. So halfway through this pipeline process, when it crashes, it always has the state document it can come back to and resume as well. All of this happened before 1 million context window too. So we had to make sure that we optimize the context window without overpopulating it. I'll probably stop here and take questions before I jump to the second side of things.
Yeah, Vidya, thanks for sharing. So this is interesting. A couple of questions on the whole journey, right? So as I understand, the primary goal of this particular activity is to use the Slack messages, developer Slack messages as a source, and also probably some additional documents, probably the PRD as a source to generate the test cases, right? But did you also set any specific goal to Claude in terms of the primary goal? For example, things like, for example, test coverage, or things like quality index, aspects like that, so that you were mentioning that the amount of test cases that it generated was quite voluminous, which overwhelmed. So what were the other non-functional requirements that are fed into the system, so that Claude can churn through whatever it has generated and then it can filter out?
Yeah. Oh, I should have probably could. Thanks for that question. I'm just covering that. So, one of the skill sets that we've had is about what is expected out of, like, the system prompt for this whole thing was what is expected out of it. And this current use case was mostly about the system level test. So we actually had to have a document initially to just tell it, like, what is system level test for us? What does it mean to us? And what parts of it is in unit level test? What part of it is an integration test? And what is a system level test? And when you're writing test plan, prioritize your test cases, give priority to this. and give us a confidence score of any part of your answer, so that we will only take the answer that you are most confident about and not the least confident about in the decision tree matrix. That was something that we coded right up front. That was way more true for as the decision matrix in this whole picture than even the like code generation was less about confidence, more about accuracy, that which we can measure when running things. But for generating the test plan, the confidence and the priority of it was more important. And reasoning as to why this priority was happening was something we codified to make sure that it's part of the template. So people taking it just from the test plan perspective can also consume it different ways.
Okay, interesting. And then just a follow-up question. So was the source of Slack messages is to give more information to the system so that it can generate more relevant
Yeah.
test cases?
Yeah, I'll probably give one example as to how we used Slack. So assuming we have a QA channel, right? Like people ask questions. These are most common questions that come to a channel. We build a knowledge base of these questions and the answers that has been given. So next time somebody wants to ask the same question, we don't have to answer it. We can build an automation that refers back to this and answers this. So like one of it was building the knowledge base of existing problems, existing FAQs kind. Second of it was, this is a feature that that's potentially breaking in this way, and this is exclusive to the particular customer base, and they discuss a lot about that use case, and it can take that and keep as a use case for which it has to write a test plan or go back and check to a point where, oh, you missed this, you missed covering this is why this incident happened, kind of it. So it's providing like laser focused context about a problem based on the threats.
Okay, that's interesting. And then one other question would be in terms of exposing the code to the system. So where you sort of restricted that the code was sort of proprietary and you wanted to sandbox it so that Claude mainly focuses or works on the document, including the requirements as well as the Slack messages.
Yeah, so this again came into the guardrails as well, and the Slack is not automatic. We even had it to a point where a human has to give that link or like vetted out that link in a way that they can fetch it through the APIs and then give it as well. Same with the code base too. One specific, very exclusive reason why we still use Claude Code also through the Bedrock is the guardrail that it gives us, and it still protects our proprietary code. So that also gave us the guardrail for it. And Bedrock in that itself also has a guardrail that we can use to prevent a lot of these things from happening. And on top of it, one major use case has always been about the test code. And test code is still user facing because we are on this is again system level test, not the actual unit or integration test level stuff. So it doesn't leak any lot of proprietary stuff about the thing itself. It's just the feature part. So that's still very much within the restricted zone, and the code itself is continuing to be i.click or i.assert on a status code and all of that. So that is also still sandboxed in that way.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
it doesn't have access to any other stuff. It's heavily sandboxed to this whole loop, and it cannot even create a test run automatically. It's only restricted to the point that it can work on a specific branch, and it can only commit to that branch, and it's still going to be the human who's deciding if the branch is even going to run somewhere else.
Okay, interesting. And sorry, before I let you next set of slides, did you also consider any like LLM router so that depending upon the nature of queries or nature of activities, you can route it so that you can save on the cost or even from that of efficiency perspective?
Yeah, so the skills that are just going and fetching stuff still uses HiQ. It does not need Sonnet or does not need Opus. Like even the most of the decisions that we do here do not use Opus. So they just use Sonnet. So each of our step in the process have different models. And we have one skill for reviewing the test that it created. So it kind of acts like a model council kind of it. One step has one model, and there's a reviewer step, there's an aggregator step, and all of that. Reviewer step uses Sonnet. but all of the other previous steps uses HiQ, and the decision matrix uses Opus. So that's like Sonnet 4.6. This is also Sonnet 4.6. Opus, unless you're going to be working on multi-repo, huge, high complexity data-driven tasks, there's absolutely no need for it at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Nice. Then no other questions, I'll probably move on to the second section of it. So while this was all happening at work, something that was happening in the personal side of things was like the boom of OpenClaw. Of course, we are not going to be using OpenClaw, experimenting with OpenClaw straight off the workspaces. So this OpenClaw advent of it was something that kind of shifted my thought process around how agentic workflows happen. And this also is kind of, it shaped how my work things happened after this. So what I did with OpenClaw at home was we kind of built a family OS. The family OS experiment was also driven through Slack because I wanted to see how OpenClaw Slack channels work. And the idea of it was what are the most common repeated set of things that I want my family to be using OpenClaw for. And I wanted it to be in Slack mainly because there are multiple actors to this system. So I want my kid to be able to use it. I want my partner to be able to use it. At the same time, I want to put guardrails in place for each of how my kid uses this versus how I or my partner uses this is going to be completely different. And I also have a bunch of automation stuff I wanted to do. So one of the immediate first things we did was like, oh, we can take a picture of the fridge and we can say, these are the things, can it identify the things that is there? And then when I start my day, it has to look at whatever I have in the pantry, make my pantry planning for me and say like, oh, you already have these things, you should probably cook this. And you have this appointment coming because I've connected it to the Gmail. Can you plan your day around it? So this was what the idea behind the Family OS was like, what are the daily parts of me that I can track, make it automated from here. But when I initially started experimenting with OpenClaw, what I did was a basic mistake, which is every single use case I had, like the recipe saving or like pantry stuff, or like my kids' homework tracking stuff, or even general discussions I had, each of it I created a separate Slack channel for each, created one agent for each, and each of it was exclusively doing certain things. And of course, OpenClaw did allow me to play around with the models. I used local LLMs for some of these things because it got way too expensive. But at the same time, there was no left hand didn't know what right hand did kind of it. So one agent did something that the other agent did no. So there was one agent for scheduling our day-to-day activities, but the other agent for my kids' activities. They both didn't talk to each other. So I did not do a multi-agent orchestration. I just did one agent per thing, and then that was a blunder, and that was actually was an expensive blunder. So this is a very rough example of what kind of agents I've had. So there was the chef one, there was a gardener one, there was an accounts one, there was a kids companion one. So what I didn't have was that one layer on top that internally invoked these things. But when I initially did it, I kept it as a way that each of this will be invoked as an ad hoc system. So that was a shift that I had. That's exclusively how shifting happened in my workspace as well. So I had one initial big system prompt, and then I split it down into separate skills. The same thing happened here. I now kind of have one general orchestrator prompt on top of all of this. And based on one kind of a question I ask, it will dedicate itself to different kind of sub-agents that is there. So each of the sub-agents have their guardrail. So for example, the chef one cannot talk anything about the finance ones, but it'll have the context of the budget this is needed for it, but it will not know anything more than that. So they'll all have to come back and write to a common memory if there is a common need for it. But if not, they don't have to do that. Same thing with my kids stuff. Kids do not necessarily have to know anything and everything that's happening outside, but they are heavily restricted to the academic planning and things like that. So what this gave me was that personality is the ultimate user interface when it comes to systems like OpenClaw or Hermes. Everything.
తీయట్లేదేందని
Right.
అదే మాకు సుల్లి కొత్త ట్రెండ్
So everything was driven through that personality or the persona.md file or the user.md file for these agents, and what they have access to and what they can or cannot do is super restricted because of the tone you set in those persona files than anywhere else. That was one nice thing and not so nice thing about OpenClaw in itself, because you need to really hammer that instruction set right to get it to a point for it to make sense and be useful to you. So along the same lines, I did all of this and I was only using like a chatbot. I used to talk to it. Why would I need to build everything and then use it as a chatbot? There's no need for me to do all of that and use it as a chatbot. So what clicked there was that the point of having a system like OpenClaw is to achieve the continuity in the process. So going back to the example of the gardener agent, the gardener agent is good. It can log the fact that, oh, I planted peas at this time. But it's as in itself, it's not a useful information. I know myself that I planted peas. I can remember that. I don't need an agent for me to remember that. But it should keep track of it to a point that it should know the timeline of all of this. And for example, the place I live is Langley. So if there is a frost there, I should take precautions for it. It alerts me that I should go and cover it that night. So this cognitive synthesis is what we want to achieve through systems like OpenClaw, or even through any of your agentic workflows that you do. Doing agentic workflows and keeping it as an isolated one without having a shared context or building a workflow around it is as equivalent as going back and using Claude or OpenAI or whatever you have in isolation. So the shift that this gave me was that it isn't about the chat, isn't about that one person using it. It is about the continuity of the system. And this continuity is where the actual boom happens, and finding that workflow it was the most hardest part of this process for me. So, and in this process, a lot of what I did, I ended up my initial goal was like I should only spend $20 to $30 per month for a home automated system like this. I ended up spending $100 per week for this, and the debugging of all of this was a nightmare. I think in our previous conversations here as well, we've had this covered. Debugging an OpenClaw system is extremely difficult right now because of the fact that there's no logs. Even if you want to have logs, you have to go through terminal after terminal. And if it's multi-agent thing, it's even worse because they don't index it. I ended up even building Grafana dashboards to see each and every single agent, how they behave and all of that. It still was not worth the effort for all that I was doing. So, and memory management is another significant problem of all of this. How I manage, how I retrieve, again, goes back to the same problem space I've had in the work. If I don't build the context enough for this agent, it will not answer, and it tends to forget which context lives where. And now that everything is in a file system, and even though it's a sandbox file system and all of that, referring or extending all of this with the memory management system was a problem, and also the reason why I tried Hermes. Hermes came with a lot of memory management tools in its backlog, like Superflow and QMD and all that. But still, rest of it was still the same kind of nightmare. Maybe memory is a little bit solved through all that, but rest of all of this was too much of an overhead unless I have a really good use case that really needs this level of continuity along the way, tracking along the way. I went back to Claude Cowork because I was anyway paying for Max for Claude Code and all that. I had no purpose to use OpenClaw for my use cases. Claude Cowork came with tons of connectors that did extremely well, and it managed my memory a lot better than me trying to manage everything through the configurations and all of that. And it also had Slack. It allows me to connect to Slack. It allows me to schedule everything. It allows me to go on a loop. And that's all I actually needed for my personal stuff. I did not see the need of having an extensive OpenClaw system running around like the whole concept of being the chief operating officer kind of a concept for OpenClaw was not something I felt was very useful for my use case. Probably it is useful when we have somebody who really has too many workflows that they want to maintain. I even went ahead and built a blogging workflow with it. I brainstorm something and I say, yes, this is my brainstorm is done. Go ahead and blog it. With GitHub connectors and Claude Code, I can do that myself in Claude Code. I don't need an OpenClaw system for it. the hardness around Claude or even OpenAI Codex, everything else has improved so well that you don't necessarily need OpenClaw kind of a system to do the things that you want to do. Unless I'm like 5, 6 workflows piped together to do something, you don't necessarily need it. The concept is what you need. Taking that concept, you can use it with existing Claude stuff, is what I felt. I'll probably stop here before the second set then and take questions.
Yeah, Vidya. So I had a couple of questions around Claude Cowork assets, right? So with respect to that of the connectors, right? Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Sure. So connectors is basically the MCP stuff. So Claude plus different kind of connectors. Like the connectors that I am using right now is Slack, Gmail, Canva for my personal use, Drive, everything, Drive, Calendar, all of that. So that basically gives me an ability to do scheduled workflows. So I have a scheduled workflow in Claude Cowork that says, go check my calendar every day morning, look at it, give me a gist in the Slack. That's what I would end up building in OpenClaw as my daily morning brief. And in that calendar, if I can, I now have a separate Gmail for all of this. So I know what access I'm giving it. I'm restricting it that way. I know which Slack channel it's coming to. And now I'm always driven through Slack because it's very easy to restrict who comes in, who goes out. It's all under our control. That's one thing. And it also, for enterprise use cases purpose, it has a lot of connectors with finance systems. With like right now, it supports Microsoft whole package Office ecosystem as well. It also has connectors, like I believe it has connectors to Snowflake and all those data-driven stuff too. So it's basically the MCP layer that I was showing before. So with that MCP layer, it can do exactly the same thing. Another biggest advantage for you is that it is controllable through phone. So you have start something there, you schedule something there, you can dispatch through phone, and you can take your whole ecosystem with you. That's kind of what OpenClaw essentially also gives you when you connect to WhatsApp. But then the interface now just becomes central Claude and then doing everything through that.
Okay. So based on my personal experience, one other challenge I had was picking the model and the corresponding token usage. So did you do any optimization on that?
I do not use Opus 4.7 at all right now. Like all of what I have said was possible with Sonnet and some of the instruction sets tweaking that I've had to do. But and even for this Gmail reading and the calendar reading, I'm just using Haiku. I'm not using even Sonnet for that. Like and Haiku is like, and I've used this with Pro. I'm now using it with Max and the 5x things, but still, even with Pro, a lot of whatever I said is going to be possible without hitting your limits. If you play around the model in a way that you would only need extreme reasoning. I mean, only you will need Opus when you need extreme reasoning. But for most scheduled looping around tasks, Haiku is more than enough. And even right now, with Claude Code, I have one most favorite skill I use called superpowers. Superpowers comes with a volley of other skills that is attached to it, which allows you take a problem set. It allows you to brainstorm. It allows you to chunk it down into sub-agent-based workflows. You don't need to do anything. You just need to tell it that this is the feature I'm going to work on. It will allow you to brainstorm along the process, allow you to sub-agentify all of the workflows, and then also does code reviews, also does proof checking of all of it together, and still doesn't eat up your whole token stuff and all that. So that's the skills that are there in marketplace, like some of the skills that Claude comes up with, Claude gives you, and also some really good outsourced ones. All use Haiku for the basic steps and Sonnet most of the time, but then Opus is only and really need to be like, I needed to understand. I don't believe in one-shotting a system. It's also probably the QA person in me who doesn't want to one-shot anything. So if you want to one-shot something, maybe use Opus for that. But even then, I would highly recommend staying away from Opus if you don't have to. And all of my Claude Cloverwork stuff has been with Haiku for most part of it.
That I have seen.
Sorry, I did not get that. Oh yeah, the caveman one is very good as well. Caveman one allows you to think about what kind of an optimized instruction set is needed for the token, for it to be token effective. So it's all boiling down to that, and it's pretty good that way too. Caveman is very good. I've used Caveman when I was trying to when I used Open Router with Gemini. Caveman really did help me think about tokens in a different way.
Yeah, I used that as well. Yeah, it was helpful. But did you use in the? I don't know whether you'll be able to use in the Cloud Cowork ecosystem.
I've not tried it in the Cloud Code ecosystem for that at all. Yeah, I've only used it with ad hoc stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts or like some best practices about observability, like tracing the agent workflows and all? Like, do you have any? Do you plan to talk about it, or is it outside the scope?
Um, it is
Like, have
outside
you?
the scope now because I'm
Okay,
still
okay,
experimenting with it.
okay, okay.
This is one of my biggest challenge personally and also at work to
Yeah,
understand. Like Bedrock right now gives us extensive logs,
right.
and the regular CloudWatch alone is not very useful to
True.
trace around and see how much token. Like it does give us like every call, every tool call, how much is the token
Mm-hmm.
usage, all that. Um, but I've not used it in the way it has to be used, where
Okay.
I track through systems and all that. I did that for my personal stuff. I like very extensively did it because I was trying to choose what model to use.
Mm-hmm.
Was it like Minimax or was it like Quen? Can I
Mm-hmm.
stick to Gemini? Because I had when I signed up for the new email, I got the $300 stuff, and like I immediately expensed all of the $300 because I was using one of the cron jobs was using Gemini's 3.1 model. It's like it was practically useless to use a cron job to get to the Gemini 3.1 because it consumed too much tokens there.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned it a very hard way by just looking at the Gemini's dashboard and trying to get to it. But my only thing I've tracked so far has been about what is the initial prompt, what are the tool
Mm-hmm.
calls that has happened, and each overall how much is the token in and out usage. And I also have that right now within my for Cloud Code. It allows you to customize your um, the status bar to even show those things right now. Uh, but other than that, I've not actually dabbled too much into the observability part because even that too, with that information, I was not able to fully optimize yet. So this is an area I would love to learn how to optimize more too.
Thank you.
I'll probably go to the next few things. So, yeah, this is something I'm trying right now with Hermes. And as I said, Hermes, I liked it. It's very similar to OpenClaw, but one thing I liked about it is the how it comes paired with some memory management tools like Superflow and QMD and all of that. One experiment I'm trying to get right with Hermes is the fact of the knowledge layer that Andrej Karpathy kind of familiarized a lot of us with in the Twitter right now. So trying to build a second brain concept is what this was all about. Uh, what it right now does is that if I give a link, I can brainstorm about that link. It gets the core concepts of the topic I'm talking to. It gets my notes. First of all, it takes the link, summarizes it, and puts it into a rack. And then on top of it, it'll allow me to brainstorm about it and put it into some form of a memory or a notebook kind of it, which I can allow it to go back, reason about, find connections between different nodes in my memory, and then give me just about, oh, this is what you were thinking about last week, and you spoke about this week. Probably these two are connected this way. Maybe you didn't think about it. Have a digest that says what my memory is about, is what I'm trying to build. Again, Claude is more promising right now because it is allowing me to do dreaming, and it's I have not tried the dreaming feature yet, but it is. They say that we are allowed to dream, run the goal-based workflows, and all that. Maybe this also can get replaced by Claude. I'm a lot Claude biased for the reason that all my ecosystem around it is Claude right now. But this layer is the only use case that I have for Hermes, other than whatever I've showed with OpenClaw. Whatever works with OpenClaw works with Hermes as well. It's fairly easy to set it up. It's pretty quick to set up Hermes because they've abstracted a lot of the complexities that OpenClaw comes up with, specifically with the memory stuff. But otherwise, it's more or less apples to apples at this point for me, for my use case. Probably it's just that there could be different other use cases for it too. And yeah, all through this, the only question that's always coming back to my mind is like, what actually makes sense to be agentic? And choosing the agentic path, there's one thing I've learned in a wrong, probably a very expensive way, is that we generally bias towards automating a persona, but that is one of the biggest cost traps that we've had in this whole experimenting basis. And unbounded autonomous loop of agents is still not production ready. It is conceptually very nice, but it's still not production ready. In production, the best pattern that always works has been a bounded on-demand tools being triggered on a secured local development harness. So what bounded means and what on-demand tools you want it to trigger is something that you have to spend a lot of time thinking about right now with the given set of ecosystem that is there. And does this require a persona or an agentic workflow, or is this just an API call? Is a fundamental question you need to ask right now for every workflow that you pick. There is definitely a lot of optimizations that we could do in terms of how a workflow is done. Like the MCP tool calls, people also right now debate like MCP versus CLI and all of that. But thinking about making a choice like that fundamentally comes down to the point of what are you trying to achieve. Getting the use case workflow right is extremely important right now. It is people fail to give a lot of thought around the intent of their workflows, and they end up spending a lot of time and then coming back to the intent saying, oh, probably this is not what I want to even build in the first place. So shifting the tracks there has been something that as very useful for us. And going back all of this, going and applying all this to work is that one thing that we have learned and we are trying to build, and one of this we have I've seen happening in a lot of conferences right now is like when last month we went to a conference for developer productivity, and they kept talking about one thing that was very surprising. People like Uber, people like Airbnb have all had this AI SDLC in practice right now. But one thing they always come back and talk is like, oh, we need the harness right. We need the verification pattern right. If that is there, agentic workflows will work very well. So it was very surprising to see after a very long time that quality being spoken as the first or the fundamental factor to get right, to get the productivity problem solved with AI. So right now, most companies are asking about, oh, how can you move fast? How can you move fast with AI? Like AI writes code for you, you should be able to move fast. But the problem was not always writing code in this industry. And then any company that has got the maturity of the local verification harness right will definitely move fast. So what I mean by the local maturity is, if be it agent or be it a human, if they can take a PR and they can have a local environment, deploy this PR, run and validate the use case that this PR is meant to be, that's all. That's all is needed right now. If that workflow is working, you have the biggest advantage in the agentic workflow, because all your agent needs at that point is, how do I verify what I wrote is correct? Yes, human in the loop is still needed, but if I can give it tools and accesses to verify things that I'm doing, then it is very good in going with the red, green, red approach. So it's even there are like skills in the marketplace that even tells you to force you to go TDD approach or red, green, red. So much so that right now, Claude, you can just say red, green, red, and it'll understand what that approach means. So that's how much emphasis has been made on harness. That's why you see Anthropic or OpenAI talk a lot about harness engineering versus about how their whole ecosystem is happening. And putting another layer on top of this is like more and more agentic systems come in, the emphasis will become about AI evals as a layer of verification compared to traditional verification methodologies. So the model is only as powerful as the infrastructure gates that is enclosing it. That is something that we all have to kind of internalize, and it took quite a while for us to internalize the factor about that model, that I cannot assume that because of the fact that I use the latest model, it'll be foolproof. That's never the case, and it's all about building everything around it. So it's moving away from the factor of just agentic workflows to the concept of software factories, and building the paved paths for these agents is the next most happening field in this industry right now. And how the sandbox works for this agent and how the automated verification gates around it works is a problem space that most big companies are trying to solve. And this is one of the most interesting intersection paths for SRE or quality or DevOps person to kind of pitch in and come back. So lot of systems right now, observability is going to be one of the game-changing fields in this transition, because that's the only way we get to know how production behaves. And if there is a way, there is a tooling or infrastructure that we can build to take that information and feed it back to the initial part of the AI cycle, your AI is going to be fast. It's going to make better decisions. But we don't have our observability built for agents. Observability is built for humans with dashboards after dashboards. But how can agent consume an observability data about production behaviors? If that part is solved, your verification loop about your use cases is solved. If you can give your agent a very well-bounded sandbox for it to go and experiment and come back with, then it's going to give you a fairly better output compared to like you going back and forth with it. But yeah, this is mostly what I wanted to convey. But I write a lot of about all of these on LinkedIn. So happy to connect and learn from you all as well. And happy to take more questions.
This was great, Vidya. I think you touched upon some of the important factors that everyone has challenges with. Right? In fact, I just wanted to hear more about the harness part of it, because that's going to be the most important changing point for the industry, be it validation of the results or even optimizing some of the workflow, right? So
Yeah, like we've had systems, we've had a lot of workflows for SDLC heavily catered towards how a human makes decision and how an artifact for a human will look like. But this will completely shift, even to a point where um, like people building websites right now are starting to think like, oh, will an agent be able to read and understand what my product is? What is the tool call chain my Claude Code or OpenAI or like Codex will need to do to get the access to my product? Like building SDKs, building all of that has always been about API documentation. Like when we had documents, we had Swagger commit. Now is another layer of like, what is that normal language or layer of communication for an agent to have so that it can understand and use my product? Like greenfield projects are not completely left to a point of agent choosing your tech stack. If an agent can understand and choose a tech stack for you, and if your product can talk to that tech stack part of it, then that's your next big thing.
absolutely.
And even for the harness engineering part, a lot of tools right now are trying to go along the direction of, oh, I can AI-fy this for you. It's like that world is gone already. That's like we've moved away from, like, you don't even have to simplify testing for it. Like one of the experiments that I'm currently doing is that I don't need test automation code anymore. I need to create natural language use cases that says this is my workflow for for this login screen. I need to log in and check this. I don't need code to test it. I can use Playwright MCP and it can orchestrate this intent and check and verify with a screenshot and come back to me. I don't even need to write code for it anymore. So what does that mean to the volley of tools of testing we have? And same with observability too. With Datadog, if I'm going to look at all of the metrics that I have, for every endpoint. It's a lot. But what if I can give that metric as something that I can in the code base for the endpoint itself? If that metric, the production metric, is already available here, the code that is changing for the agent will make a better decision. How can we make agents do better decisioning is all what this is about. We'll start seeing some of the companies are coming in this space, but we'll start seeing more companies coming into this logic of how context is going to change for agents and how graph logic is going to work, how the entire system behavior is a graph RAG and than a regular RAG. So if somebody in my team already, we're joking the other day that whatever we built with LangChain was just basically replaced with Notebook LM right now. So I don't even need all of that. So that's how fast things are moving, but it's all moving towards this layer of context and towards this layer of harness rather than hyperindexing on the model or anything like that. Any model is as good as other right now. That having a model or locking into a vendor is so much so as a disadvantage if you don't have a nice hard disk. That's also, I think, the reason why Cloud Code is super famous, because it got the harness logic very, very well. And if you can get the same harness logic with any other model, you can very well use a local LLM. It's not going to be any different.
Yeah, well said, because that's the missing piece in all of the ecosystems, right? Yeah. And in fact, one other important thing on the harness part, right? Some of the existing IDEs, they still tend to be looking at more like a manual development activity. They haven't really built any intelligence on top of it, so that some of whatever we do in a regular thing gets cut. As you are mentioning, why do we need test automation when you can embed all of that as part of the whole workflow, right? So, yep.
Yeah. It will change. Like a lot of new tools are going to come in, and it's like the shifting of the thought process is a difficult thing. It's that's why I structured this talk on the shift rather than saying like this is what I did kind of it, because it definitely was a transition to use these tools and understand what they mean by agentic workflow, and to understand that itself was quite a task, honestly.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Let's see if there are any
I'll
questions.
stop sharing and then take questions if there are any.
Any questions before we end the session? I assume no. Again, thanks a lot, Vidya. I think we should probably have some follow-up sessions, particularly the harness part of it. And also, I think some of the new agents that are coming in, including Hermes, would be a good follow-up session, I would say.
Yeah, sure. I'll experiment more with Hermes and I'll come back for another session soon.
Thank you so much. And,
Thank you. Thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it.
thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.